Okay, I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Select Board and Chair of the Select Board Committee on Policing Reform, and this is our meeting of, what's today's date? October 21st,
21st.
2020. Okay, let's start the meeting. To begin with, I'm going to allow June Benny to read a statement, which will be self-explanatory. So, June?
Again, I read a statement, but this is my last one. So thank you, Bernard.
June.
So it's with great sadness that I resigned from the Committee on Policing Reform shortly after our meeting 2 weeks ago. I had hoped and believed that Bernard's chokehold gesture and my smile, for which we both apologize, would be a one-day news story, or as my mentor, Governor Mike Dukakis, used to say, today's news will be used to wrap tomorrow's fish. However, week after week, there was coverage of this incident in the Brookline Tab. We held a joint public forum in which a few young people I know through my kids and a bunch of adults I don't know at all attacked me and leveled anti-Semitic diatribes against me. I'm not even particularly religious, but I did take offense. And particularly during our last meeting on October 7th, which started with a statement by one of our members about me slowing down our work and being a divisive force between our committee and Raul Fernandez's committee, which is ironic because I still think there should only be one committee here. And I only applied to Raul's and I was rejected. I never applied to this committee. Anyway, I had to take my leave from that meeting. I don't know if people noticed that. I was experiencing shortness of breath and chest pains. I believe I experienced my first ever panic attack, though I'll leave that to Dr. Childs to tell me whether that was what it was. It was at that point I realized I really needed to step down to protect the health and well-being of myself, my husband, and my children. And perhaps as Jonathan Mandy suggested, despite working nearly full time on these issues for the committee, I had indeed become a distraction to the committee's work and a divisive force in Brookline's policing reform efforts. I'll certainly remain committed to and passionate about the issues before the committee. This has been my life's work for nearly 40 years. And I think there's no more important work to do in 2020 and beyond, besides, of course, electing a new president and coming up with a vaccine for COVID. So we have a lot of things to do. But I recognize the personal and professional significance of doing this important work in my own backyard. However, my community sadly did not recognize and appreciate the value of my efforts and expertise in the place I've called home and returned to time and time again since 1978. I've already begun to take policing reform work to communities throughout the Commonwealth as well as in other states. I've begun to secure some exciting new projects. Many thanks, Bernard, to you and to other members of the committee for your continued support and indulgence of my need to clear my name and reputation. Despite the emotional and physical toll the past 2.5 months have taken on me and my family, it has been a great privilege to work with all of you and to learn, Bernard, from your clear and steady voice. Please feel free to call on me if I can lend staff support to the committee in any way behind the scenes, as I hope to be able to continue to contribute as my time allows. I wish you all only the best in this important effort. I look forward to reading your recommendations as they're formulated. And in the meantime, please take good care of yourselves and your families and take care of each other and keep yourselves safe and healthy as we navigate these most difficult and scary of times. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, June. I've asked June to continue working on some videos, which we'll talk about later in the meeting. So again, I apologize for the difficulty I had getting on. I don't know what happened. It's usually very easy for me to get on to Zoom, but today I had problems for this meeting, although I didn't have problems for earlier meetings, so who knows. So let's begin with approval of the minutes of September 23rd, September 30, which is a transcript, and October 7th. And thank whoever did it for preparing the transcript. I think it'd be very, very helpful to our deliberations to have an actual transcript of the hearing. I understand that Marty has some comments regarding the minutes. If others have comments, please let us know. Marty?
Well, yeah, I'd actually urge that they wait 2 weeks and that they add. We talked about this last time, and I thought there was no disagreement. I wanted at least a summary of each person's comments as to.
This is the 23rd meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we do this?
Let me just finish my sentence, Bernard. So I also have a few nitpicks that I was going to wait for that to send, so I could do both at the same time and hope that we could table these until the next meeting and see if you want to add my nitpicks for the draft minutes.
Okay, is that for this September 23rd and October 7th?
Do we have October 7th? I don't see those.
Okay.
No, I only have been back for 2.5 days, so I have
Oh,
not had time to
yes.
watch all
Okay.
the meetings that I've missed and then write the minutes for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my fault. I
That's okay.
put that in the agenda. Okay, so let's hold September 23rd. And Marty, send me your comments, and we'll work together to get it. Get what you want in there. The transcript for September 30. I assume people haven't read it, but I'd like to approve it. Or what do people think? You want to approve it or put that off?
This is Devin. I will say that we did outsource that. So that was someone who just sat down and wrote down word for word what happened in the entire 3-hour event.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just approve it as written. Anyone object? Okay, I move approval of the September 30, 2020 minutes, which is a transcript. This will enable us to put that up on our website as an approved set of minutes. All in favor? Devin, I can only see you and me. So could you run the roll call?
Yes. Everyone, if you could just make sure that you're unmuted so we can get through this as quickly as possible. Elizabeth Childs,
Yes.
June Binney,
I'm no longer a member.
Ronald Wilkinson,
Yes.
Paul Yee,
Yes.
Jonathan Mandy,
Yes.
Marty Rosenthal,
Yes.
Dwayne Tyndall,
Yes.
Michael Zurab,
Yes.
Casey Hatchett,
Yes.
and the chair.
Yes. And by the way, June, you were a member on the 23rd, or on the 30th. I'm sorry, when the hearing was held, so you can vote.
Hey, thanks. Yes.
Okay. Next.
Sorry, Bernard, just for quick clarification, if you guys did discuss this on the 7th, did anything come out of that discussion for those minutes? Did anyone try and edit them at all? Or is there like a document that I missed is my question.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, great.
Okay. Next. I feel a need to apologize for the delay. I mean, this really is frustrating. But at any rate, we are where we are. Next, the packet that Devin posted to the web page includes a cut and paste of a Facebook posting by the police department on a mental health incident here in Brookline on Sunday. I put that out there so that as we discuss some of these issues, we have some of the context for, in this case, certain types of mental health calls. Also in the packet is a transcript of the joint hearing we held on September 30 and materials from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on federal legislation titled the Mental Health Justice Act. I'm asking you to please read these materials including the piece I posted from the police department's Facebook page without any preconceptions and read them critically so that we can learn from each of these, what will be seen as different approaches to mental health police calls. We're not specifically dealing with them now, but I think it's important background information for this committee to have. So there was a proposal to begin each meeting with an educational presentation. For example, we earlier had officers Pilgrim and Walker talk about their experiences as young Black police officers in Brookline. Tonight, I decided to run a video that is in a draft stage on training and the use of force. It's the substance of this video that I think is very important, and I think it's presented very well. There are some glitches with the video that we will fix before sharing it again with the committee and posting it to our website. With this video too, I'm asking you to look at it critically and send any comments you have to Dan O'Leary. I think at some point in this meeting, we should discuss how we select future educational programs for the meeting when we hear from the subcommittees. But I want to start this video, which is not a long video, but I think it's very important.
Excuse me, before you start video, Bernard, if I may, I don't recall if we ever voted on whether to have that proposed educational piece before every meeting. I just don't recall if that ever happened.
No, I don't think we voted on it, but we did discuss it, and there's no
Right.
objection. Yeah, I don't think we need to formally vote on something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were going to go ahead. You did say it was a proposition, and you were going to go and show a video. I mean, I just don't. I don't think we need to have a video every single time we meet. That's my own perception, but I don't know what other people think about it.
Okay, well let's discuss this later in terms of whether we want to have videos and what topics, which is I think the most important thing, because I can't just pick out topics. I mean, I sort of made an executive decision with respect to Officers Pilgrim and Walker, because that was we hadn't discussed it. Made an executive decision here, but in the future we should probably do it a little more systematically. Okay. Let's see. Devin, could you run the video? I'm on my laptop, which I can't, which is problematic.
Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, I see it.
Hi, my name is Paul Campbell. I'm a lieutenant with the Brookline Police Department. I've worked with the police department for 22 years. I'm currently assigned to the Office of Professional Development. Hi, I'm Lieutenant Andrew Amendola.
The audio is really low. Is it possible to increase the audio?
Assigned to the training unit within the Community Service Division. I've been a Brookline police officer for almost 25 years. Currently assigned to the training unit within the Community Service Division. Use of force. It is the policy of the Brookline Police Department that police officers may use only the amount of force that is proportionate and necessary to control an incident, make an arrest, or to protect themselves or others from injury or death. When time and the totality of the circumstances permit, officers shall use de-escalation tactics in order to reduce the need for force. The critical decision-making model. The critical decision-making model was adopted by the Brookline Police Department several years ago, and all of our officers have been trained in it. This is a 5-step critical thinking process that starts with collecting information. An example I could give would be dispatch calls the officer on the street and says they have a shoplifter at a local store. The officer is going to then start to collect information. Is there only one subject? Are they still in the building? Do we have a witness? If they fled the building, which direction did they go? Do you have a description? All of those things are in the first step in the collecting of information. The officers then will move to number 2, assessing situations, threats, and risks. Were there any weapons? Do we have any other information that might make this situation more dangerous or risky for the officer? The third
Just lost audio.
limit or restrict or
Good.
direct the officer to respond in a certain way. Number 4, the officers will identify options and determine the best course of action. So in the shoplifting incident, the officers locate the subject, they have them ID'd, and then they have to make the decision. Do I arrest? Do I summons? Do I issue a no trespass and release them? So the officer will go through those different options and determine the best course of action. And the last step in the process is acting on those decisions that were made, reviewing, and then reassessing. Keep in mind that at any point in time during the 5-step critical thinking process, the officer may receive more information or new information, which will then bring them back to, they have to assess for threats and risks. They may have to change their thought processes on what policies may be affecting the situation. Again, identify the best course of action and then act on those. If you look at the picture there in the middle, it's a little blurry sometimes to see it, so I'll read it for you. It It says ethics, values, proportionality, and the sanctity of human life. If you also notice the arrows, that each step in the critical thinking process also interacts with ethics, values, proportionality, and the sanctity of human life.
Anytime there's a use of force by a Brookline police officer, the officer submits a written report. The sergeant working the shift will then review that report. After this occurs, the sergeant who oversees the incident will submit their own report. This report will evaluate the use of force and determine whether or not it's within the policy guidelines. Both the officer report and the sergeant report are reviewed by the commanding officer of the shift prior to the end of the shift. The deputy superintendent of the division will also conduct a review of these use of force reports. In addition to those reviews, the Office of Professional Responsibility will also conduct a review of all use of force instances. The Office of Professional Responsibility submits a monthly report to the Chief of Police reviewing these use of force incidents and determining whether or not they were in compliance with department policy. Use of force incidents are also included in the annual report produced by the department's crime analysis unit. This annual report is uploaded to the department website for the public to view. In addition to these internal reviews, the department has also begun participating in the FBI National Use of Force Data Collection Project. This project collects data nationally on use of force incidents that either result in death or serious bodily injury or involve the discharge of a firearm at or in the direction of a person.
Training. The Brookline Police Department recognizes that training is one of its most important responsibilities. The department realizes that a process of continual training and updating
Devin, can you stop the video now?
high level of professionalism. All aspects of training, whether recruit training,
Devin, can you stop the video?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's gone.
roll call,
Okay.
are designed.
Okay. I stopped the video because they're getting into training, and I just wanted to focus on use of force to give you a sense of how this how use of force issues are dealt with in the police department, both in terms of the policy itself, the critical decision-making process that they use, as well as the supervision and reporting that goes along with that. We'll have to be talking about this going forward, and this was just a taste of the issue, but I think an important taste of it. And 5 minutes is enough, so we'll go on. I'd like to hear any comments that people have, and like I said, we're going to be putting together this video with some corrections. For example, there's a reference to the FBI threshold for making a report on the use of firearms. Brookline standard is a little different. In other words, the FBI requires a report if there's a discharge of a weapon. In Brookline, it's if you take the weapon out of your holster. That's a significant difference. And we'll fix some of those little glitches in the video before it's released. But at any rate, any questions, any comments?
I'd like to say something. So I think this is a good baseline video. It explains what the policies are in reasonable detail, which I think is an important place for people to start. What I expect will happen since you notice that virtually everything depends on internal oversight within the police department. I would imagine that some feedback, criticism that we would get would be that it relies on the police department hierarchy being trustworthy. And in other police departments around the country, there's been evidence that the whole department structure is somewhat corrupt. And so even though these policies are in place, they won't be enforced. So I actually personally think that Brookline is in a better situation than that. But if you consider that anything can be is corruptible, should there be a way for external review of use of force, as well as the internal structure, to ensure against problems in the possible problems in the future, and to reassure people who are less trustful about the process right now.
I think that's a good point, and out of this committee's deliberations, maybe that is a recommendation if we can figure out how to actually make it. I mean, what would that look like? I mean, it's not an easy answer, but I think that we can come up with something that would address that concern. So, any other thoughts?
See nobody, I'll jump in. First of all, this will overlap with one of the things that I've discussed with the accountability committee, and Will was going to bring up in the course of that report tonight. But this is one of the things that's supposed to be on the agenda for the accountability committee, but as the members know, it's not yet a functioning subcommittee of that committee, which I've been suggesting it should be. It was on the list of things that we're supposed to be doing. So I appreciate Ron's question. I think it's things that we need to be looking into. And I'm not sure that, I mean, I could ask about 20 minutes of questions about it right now, but nobody wants me to. And frankly, I'm not sure I want to. But it seems to me that that's a huge issue for this entire committee. And as you know, as all of you know ad nauseum, I'm a huge proponent of subcommittees. So I'm hoping that we can get a functioning subcommittee looking at that on the accountability committee. While I have the floor, I'll switch to two other quick comments. Are these slides available to us, or a PowerPoint, whatever it was? And,
Yes. Yeah.
okay.
You mean the slides, not the video?
No, you can see.
Well, yeah, I think the slides to me they're probably easier to download and share.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's mostly what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I can get them. I'll make a note to circulate the slides. But remember, and maybe that's the way to give people an opportunity to add their comments and critiques. So I'll get that to you next day or two.
Well, I actually may I ask a question, Marty? If it was possible for you to get the video easily, would you prefer getting the video, because that's the thing in the entirety? I mean, you seem to be assuming that it's easy to give the slides, but it's probably not hard to give a link to the video if that's what you want.
Fine too. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not as I've said 100 times, not a techie person. So the slides were the first thing that came to my mind. But I think your suggestion is a good one. If it's easy.
I know. Yeah, I know
it
it's
is easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I can do is I have links to these videos. I didn't send them around because I think they're not in final form. So if you don't mind, I'd like to. Why don't I'll send them around, but just be aware that there are a lot of glitches that need to be fixed, and other things. I'll try to get updated videos if possible, but whatever I have, I'll send out next day or two.
Just one last question on that. Can the slides be sent separately as well?
Yeah, I mean, I assume.
All right. Well, anyway, I think both would be helpful, at least to me. But thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, let's move on. So let's see. I want to start off with in terms of the subcommittees. Let me just give you a really quick report on the online education piece, which this video is a part of. And then I want to go to subcommittee reports. So while I'm going through this, think about what your subcommittees have been doing, and plans for going forward. What type of work plans you have, and where you think you'll end up in terms of being able to present some recommendations. So the training use video that we just saw is one of the videos we're working on. Others include racism in policing, which is being done by Dr. Gerard Cox and Deputy Michael Grotman, to walk and talk video, which I really like because it includes presentation by newly hired police officer Patah Johnson. Okay, and remember he was one of the officers we hired in July of this year. And he speaks as someone who knew and worked with the walk and talk officers when he was a youth living in the high street apartments of the Brookline Housing Authority. So I mean, I think that his testimony in that video is very compelling. And you know, as we talk about walk and talk, you know, we need to really you know, use him as a resource. Third video that is pending, hiring and recruitment. Again, a very important video in terms, or very important issue in terms of ensuring that the officers we have on the force have been vetted, so that some of the problems that we see around the country are maybe not eliminated, but you know, severely reduced. Third, a video that's already been prepared on police budget, police department budget. We're gonna revise that in a significant way, so I'm gonna hold that before sending it to you. But it's a very good explanation of budget that will give us a sort of foundation to make recommendations as they relate to the budget. Next, video that's being prepared is on autism and related issues. You know, there's a lot of research on how many issues with police violence arise from a lack of communication. And children on the autism spectrum have, among other issues, sometimes communication issues. And if they're not understood properly, you know, bad things happen. Next, we're going to do one on police psychological supports, making sure that, you know, the type of stresses and pressures on police do not result in, you know, them breaking down and maybe doing something bad in the community. And then we're going to have mental health issues in policing. These are videos being prepared by June Benny and her husband, Richard Chiola. And June's going to discuss how and why mental health issues come up in policing in the criminal justice system, how they become racial issues, and some best practices from around the country focusing on ways of decriminalizing behavioral health conditions. In other words, decriminalizing being mentally ill, you know, which is a problem in this country, but also around the world. Her husband will talk about what is needed if we are going to be able to take some of the burden of behavioral health conditions off of the police and prevent the crises that make 9/11 calls to police necessary. Now, this is sort of drifting over into the subject matter of the Reimagining Policing Task Force, but I think it's still important for us to really think about these things as we consider our reform agenda. So that's, you know, the online education so far. We're also putting together a number of fact sheets. There's just one up right now, and that is on details. If you have any interest in details, please read this fact sheet. It explains, you know, who pays for them and some of the issues that arise. So with that, let's move on to subcommittee reports.
Bernard, I hate to,
Yeah.
can I ask two questions about that? But
Sure.
the videos, they all sound like worthy topics that I'd like to see, but I probably should know the answer to this, but what's being done with these videos? Right? Is anything being done right now with them?
Yeah, they're being produced right now, and I want to make sure that the committee has a chance to view them before we post them online, so that we,
Okay,
we can.
all right. I think that's the answer. So the plan is to post them online eventually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The plan, the plan is to have a folder on our website. I'd call it something like educational materials or whatever. And in that folder, there'll be videos that we've produced and also fact sheets. So the purpose of it will be to a place where people can learn about some of the underlying issues that we're talking about, and from which we're going to be making recommendations. So.
All right, thanks.
Sorry, I also have a follow-up on that. I'm wondering, or at least I'm having a bit of a hard time seeing the, and maybe Bernard, you can help me understand how the videos themselves are sort of, on par with understanding the critical dysfunctions that lie within the police department that has brought us on this table. I guess that's part one, and part two is, I just wonder if somehow I feel as though in some way these videos are in some ways PR for the police department. I'm wondering if maybe you can help me understand these things.
Okay, first of all, the videos are designed. Okay, if we assume that there's dysfunction, then of course we're going to look for evidence of that dysfunction. The assumption of this committee should be that we're looking for evidence and then determining what our conclusion is. So what I want to do with these videos is just give people the foundational information with which they can then, dig deeper, come up with, recommendations, figure out what is missing, from the explanation in these videos, et cetera. But we can't start, a process like this unless we have some ability to have access to basic information about what it is we're talking about. And this is not just, these are done for the most part, not all of them, but most of them are done by the police department. So you could call it PR, but we're doing others by other people, as well as including material on our website from other perspectives uh, than policing. So hopefully all of that information will be a good foundation for us to examine the Brookline Police Department and figure out what makes sense and what doesn't.
Yeah, if I may, I'm just going to push back just a little bit here. We are all here for a reason, and it's not because we want to be spending all this time having these discussions. I don't think it's not because anybody's starting with assuming that there's dysfunction. It is because there have been many years of complaint from people that have experienced dysfunction, myself included. And so I think it's not about coming from a position of retribution of some kind, or a one-sided I've been wronged by the Brookline police and therefore it's not about that. It's the fact is that like the gentleman I spoke with interviewing earlier today, people have and continue to experience dysfunction from the Brookline police, and so it's not an assumption, right? Per your acknowledgement, I think there is some critical functions that we can understand about the police and the work they do, but we have to be careful where the line can be crossed in becoming just PR on the good works of the police department. Nobody's gonna dispute that the Brookline Police Department do good work, but at the same time, I feel these videos are PR. It's PR work for the police department, created mostly by the police department.
Okay, if you want to view them as PR, they're still important PR for us to work with.
So it is PR.
No, I'm not. That's what you're saying. I don't think
Well,
they're
you just
PR.
said it is good PR for us to work with. That's what you
No,
just
I
said.
said if you no, listen. If you want to view it as PR, then we still view it as important PR for us to work with. I don't view it as PR, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that this gives us some information that we can start from in our examination of policing issues here in Brookline, and in that examination we will identify where the lapses are, where the gaps are in terms of the information. For example, what Ron mentioned earlier, with respect to the use of force video, what protections do we have that against I don't know what you called it.
Internal corruption,
Yeah, right.
in the hierarchy, because it's all
Right.
internal. So you'd want to have some other kinds of checks on that.
Yeah.
And a similar thing would be, I know that there's also a pending a video about the internal complaint process for the
Right.
police. And it's like videos say, well, this is the way you do a complaint thing about the police. I'm quite sure that people who actually really want to file complaints will have problems with the complaint process, because it involves a certain amount of trust about
Right.
the police, which you're not going to have if you want to file a complaint. And so, but to partly address what you're saying, Jonathan, to me, these kinds of videos gives us a starting, one of the starting points for discussion. We will look at the video and say, now wait a minute, this is what they're saying, but this is not the way I see it, and these are where the gaps are. But we have a common place to start. That's the way I see it.
And by the way, with respect to the complaint video, I asked Dan O'Leary to pull that because the complaint or the accountability committee or subcommittee is working on the complaint process. And I think it was that was put together just, you know, I don't know why it was put together, but we're not going to release that for among other things, reasons you mentioned. So.
But I want to join with what Ron just said, because as I watched that video today, a few minutes ago, there were at least a half a dozen questions that came up in my mind that it triggered for the accountability committee as it looks at the use of force thing. So it seems to me that we can look at written policies like the use of force, which I think is about a half a dozen pages in the police manual. I don't know, more or less. But watching this in terms of what's being done with those policies, to me, raised excellent questions that we need to pursue and see if we can improve. And secondly, as to the word public relations, that can mean different things to different people. It can be like calling something advertising, which is a negative word. I do believe that educational material for the community is important, and that's something that our overall committee needs to look at and improve. We can improve all these videos. Well, maybe not. I mean, I'm guessing that we'll have some suggestions on them. So I don't think we should, any more than politics is a dirty word, I don't think public relations is necessarily a dirty word.
Well, it can become dirty, Marty, if it's skewed.
It can be, sure. Yeah.
Similar to how K through 12 can be skewed in what you're learning and how you're learning it.
Absolutely, sure.
But our our critical faculties are what we use to identify where the gaps are in things that are presented to us, whether in school or in committee like this. That's why I asked you to look at things critically.
Well, I'm all about critical thinking, so let's do it.
Okay. So let me just give you an example of one sort of small thing where I think not a video but a fact sheet is very important to enable us to have an intelligent conversation, and that is details. There's a complaint somewhere, I don't remember where, that the town is paying $6 million to police to do detail work. So this person thought that the town pays the police to do these detail work. So the fact is the town doesn't. It's the companies that are using police as detail officers, for example, NETA on Route 9, that pays the police to the police, and then they additionally pay a 10% administrative fee to the town. So we make money off of that. We put out a fact sheet on that, which I think it's going to correct that piece of misinformation, but also it raises other questions, and that is what someone somewhere said was, do details result in police being overworked since they have to do a detail and then they come in and do their regular shift? That's a legitimate question that we should investigate and answer and make recommendations accordingly. But I mean, that's an example of where putting out the basic facts, both corrects misunderstandings as well as raises or enables us to see some additional questions that have to be examined.
Right. Well, I mean, sorry, I'm just going to say this point. I know we have to move on, but in the case of NETA, my understanding is that, they're required to have a certain number of police officers present. I'm not sure it's NETA's choice to do that. It's per the requirement that is mandated by the police department that forces them to have that amount of police presence there.
Yeah, but that's not unusual.
So that's not something that police is putting out there and saying, we mandate them to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why they're paying this amount of money. That's not, when you talk about having, an open dialogue and to have a intelligent conversation, that's not information that's put out there.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I mean,
what I mean, based on the fact that you just presented, right? Based on that fact, the fact that you just presented of the fact that NETA is the one who pays the police and not the department paying the police is the inverse. The information put out doesn't state that NETA is mandated to have a certain amount of police and therefore have to, pay a certain amount of money as a result.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I'm not sure what you're getting at there.
Well, what I'm getting at is that perhaps if it was up to NETA, they would have one police officers and more of their employees covering that are very capable covering security, right? And so sorry, let's move on. But
clarify one point on that. The police department is not mandating that NETA have a detail. My understanding, Bernard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that was negotiated at the town level.
In
response to the request by the community who is being significantly impacted. That was not the police department mandating that. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no, all the details are mandated by the town. I mean, including construction details. When people have big parties, they're sometimes required to have a police detail there to keep order. So, I mean, the NETA situation is just an example I use because everyone knows about NETA and knows about the police at NETA. So, but it's not an unusual situation. Okay, any other discussion? So, what committee would like to start off? How about personnel, structure, and mission? Who's on that committee and who can?
I'd be happy to do that, Bernard. I'm happy to do that. Okay. So we had our first meeting. We have our second meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Our agenda is we're starting our work with some basic background and fact sheets on uniforms, figuring out what the issues are, about the difference between the general orders on uniforms and special orders. We're going to be working, Dan, with you around making sure we understand our basics, the starting point on that, and maybe working through which officers we should talk to on that, how we should work on that, because we already heard some of that. We're working on the governance, and Michael Downey is graciously helping us pull together some facts about that. We're using the details fact sheet that you mentioned, Bernard, as our starting point. That's on our agenda to talk about details, police overtime. So we're starting with that fact sheet. And at some point, we didn't want to start everything all at once, but we know we need to reach out to you in terms of joining us for a meeting to talk about many of the HR issues that are involved with the police department. And so,
You mean Ann Braga?
Ann Braga,
Ann Braga.
yes. Ann Braga, yes. When you, we'll just need to include you, Ann. But we had so many fish to fry. We thought we would start with some other issues first, but just so you know, we'll be coming to you shortly with that.
Don't want you to overfill the fry pan.
Right, exactly. And then
Hey,
of
don't
course,
talk about fried fish. You're making me hungry.
yeah. And then of course, the civil service issue is a big one on our agenda. And we're starting again, Michael Downey on our committee is helping us outline some of the pros and cons. Our goal there is to have the fact sheet. Mel, thank you very much for that very comprehensive email. And now I understand why at the last meeting you looked at me like I had two heads. Now I got it. I get it. And we are, our plan there, our goal there will be to come up with a recommendation to the whole committee for the civil service issues. So Dan will also need your help on some of that stuff, I think.
By the way, that's a big lift.
It's a big lift, right? Exactly. So that's where we're starting: uniforms, governance, and civil service. Trying to just get our arms a little bit around some of the issues around details is our fourth point.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'd like to suggest is that civil service is really so important, and it's a big lift that be the focus, and maybe even put off some things for a later time, if because it's going to take up a lot of time.
I think we can talk about that tomorrow morning at the committee, Bernard, but I think when we started to get our arms around all the things on this subcommittee, that would be really a relief, actually, to focus on one thing.
And I assume with civil service, you're going to look at pros and cons, some of the issues that have come up over the years with civil service, some of the problems that we've had with civil service, as well as, the pro side, why, I don't know what, I assume that, well, let me not assume. There are people in town who are in favor of civil service continuing. I'd like to just know what their arguments are, so we can, okay. Good.
So I think that would be fine. We can make that the top priority of the committee.
Bernard?
Yeah.
I'm trying to use the raise your hand thing, but nobody seems to be looking at it. So I'm just chiming in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
that's all right. All right. Just forget about it. So I have two comments, questions, comments. I don't know. First of all, I'd point out the details were listed in the chores for that subcommittee. So there is a resting point for those questions. But on civil service, I have a bigger question. First of all, I'm not sure I personally agree that that's the first that should be the first priority for that committee for this reason. It goes into my other comment, which is related. Civil service involves two big sets of issues that are intertwined but separate. One is the hiring process, which I believe is a crucial question, especially in terms of the composition of the workforce and diversity, etc. That's one question. But the second question is discipline. And to some extent, I don't even know the answer to this after 45 years working on these issues. I'm not sure the extent to which those things can be separated. So I call that to the attention of the subcommittee. But the other reason I bring it up is the discipline is in the mission of the accountability committee. And one thing that I'm hoping we'll get into is internal discipline that's separate from citizen complaints. And that certainly raises civil service issues. So at some point we need to talk about whether those two questions can be separated. The reason I don't think, my personal view would not be at this point to make it the first priority is partly because it's complicated with both of those issues. Secondly, it's very complicated politically and legally. And ultimately, if anything were going to be done about it, we'd have to talk to the union. And it just strikes me as a long process that's going to take months. I'm open to changing things, but I just am not sure that it's simple enough to make it the first priority over, say, staffing levels, for instance. I mean, there's a budget coming out in January to be voted in June. And it seems to me staffing levels is something that we need to be looking at in the near future to go into those budget discussions. There's just one example of the task list of that committee, which Michael and I helped draft.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And you know, the subcommittee will figure that out. The reason why I said that civil service should be a priority is that we were specifically asked by the town administrator to look at this, to look at civil service. And I acknowledge it is very complicated, but you know, what we should do is maybe provide a sort of analytical framework with which the select board, town meeting, and ultimately, you know, the legislature can work with in terms of figuring out, you know, what is the best course. And you know, that's including things like the pros and cons, you know, the difficulties that is created for us in terms of not just discipline, but also in terms of hiring, as you said, diversity, and any number of other things. So, okay, you want to talk about accountability? Oh, it's Michael Zorob who's chair of the accountability committee. Is that right?
I think I'll give the main update, and I'm sure Marty will have further comments. So as a whole, the committee's been meeting for a few weeks now. We held a hearing with Bobby Nabel and Kelly Race, who wrote a report in 2017, like a study of the police complaints process. And we reviewed their report and asked them questions about it and learned what they saw as flaws with the current or ways in which the current process ought to be improved, largely involving streamlining, especially in the context of select board appeals, and also making the process more accessible. We're going forward as a committee. We're hoping to speak with other important folks in the human relations and police complaints sort of field. So we're going to talk to Anne Braga, who's on the call, of course, on Monday to talk about how HR complaints relates to police complaints. And I'm sure we'll have to talk to a few more folks, but that's kind of the big informational piece. Substantively, we're really working on complaints right now. I think Marty will provide a dissenting opinion, but I think most of us think we're doing one thing at a time, and right now we're working at complaints. So in that regard, Raj and Jonathan have been interviewing folks who filed complaints and who were willing to speak with us. So that process is ongoing. I know that at least a couple of those interviews have happened. And so that's kind of giving us a sense of what at least some people's experiences are with the complaints process, and hopefully that will shed some light on ways that we can improve it. And then Marty and I have been working on the complaints document policy, like the policy document, and making changes to the language. Things we're looking at include changing intake and providing additional support for complainants through the Office of Diversity, publicizing the complaints process, reviewing who conducts the biennial assessment of the complaints process, and other changes to the complaints process, like the duration of time during which complaints are held on file. Basically, there's a procedure for reviewing officers who have a pattern of complaints, but it's a very short period of time during which like those complaints are kept. It's only a couple of years. So it's, anyway, just reviewing stuff like that. But that's where we're at right now. I mean, as far as timeline, we're really hoping to provide a kind of full report on changing and updating the complaints procedure. I mean, I think within a month. That's my ambitious, but I think feasible timeline. And anyone on the subcommittee can feel free to add or correct what I've said.
Great. I like that you have a timeline. You know, we're not going to hold you to it necessarily, but you know that we do have at least a goal of getting something out within a month. and that's
Yeah,
great.
and I'd like to move on to other stuff besides complaints, and that requires providing useful feedback on that first. So, yeah.
Good. Okay. Any Marty, do you have something to add, or anyone else on this?
Well, only that, I know everyone on the committee is doing everything that they have time for. It's been a little frustrating to me to put everything else on hold. It's not like, especially like Jonathan and Raj are interviewing people that filed complaints. And we've got, a subcommittee working on the civilian complaints, but it's things like the use of force stuff that came up in the video. I'd like to know how it's being enforced internally more than what was stated in the video. And also there's misconduct that's not reported by a citizen, like what's going on this past week, these what I'd call a scandal with the state police. A lot of misconduct is being pushed under the rug, and in fact, in some ways, negatively reinforced. So there's the training process. So I don't know if we need to think about trying to get another member of the full committee on our committee to we need more person power. But I'm not a big fan of just doing everything in serial fashion. I think some of these things, I wish that we could be looking at some of them simultaneously. I don't think we need to discuss that now, but I'm expressing the same frustration that I've expressed to the subcommittee, which has wonderful people. But I just feel like there's topics that are going to be more difficult than some might think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, we're going to need to replace June. And by the way, let me just say at this point, if people know of people who can apply or willing to apply to be on the committee, please have them fill out the application form. And at some point, the select board will select someone to replace them from these new people, as well as the people who applied earlier. So that's one thing. I guess my only point is that, if we only have to have the bandwidth to do, for example, the complaint process over the next, let's say, few weeks, we shouldn't undermine that by trying to also do a bunch of other things. And, to the extent that we have the bandwidth to do the other things, I think that's great. But, I always think that a committee like this needs to really focus on what they can do quickly, and then put other things in a list of things to be completed afterwards, unless they have the bandwidth to do it simultaneously.
One more comment, and I don't disagree with what you just said. Another issue that goes to the whole committee and maybe to the task force gets back to the question of bringing in outside experts, because the 800-pound gorilla in the room on civilian complaints, which we're not discussing yet, and I think we need outside input on, is do we talk about a separate civilian review board that's different from the disciplinary process that we have? I know there's probably people right now in this committee that would like to do that, or like to at least think about it. But it seems to me to address that question, we need people that have more nationwide experience with that question. I don't think you do it by a gut feeling. You need, the Diversity Commission is trying to look at it seems to me to be fairly ad hoc choices of other communities to look at for human rights complaint processes. I don't think that's the systematic way to do it. There are experts, two of whom I've mentioned to all of you, Howard Friedman and Jack McDevitt, that could give us input on that 800-pound gorilla. And I don't know if it's just our committee or the task force, both, that should be hearing from some of these people. So I'll just put that out there and let Bernard figure out what to do about it.
Oh God, thanks. No, we should definitely bring in experts, and we should, if we think experts are important for our work, we should bring them in, even if there's overlap with the reimagining committee. Um, but in terms of this, let's also think about what are the two options aren't our current situation and an independent review board. Independent review boards tend to be appropriate and not very effective for cities of a significant size. We're just a small town. But so maybe there's another way of dealing with this issue of some independent eyes looking at complaints other than a separate big bureaucracy review board. So yeah.
Why does a
So
review board have to be very big and bureaucratic? I mean, if you're talking 2 or 3 people, I don't see why that necessarily has to be big and bureaucratic. It's just, I would think of it as being more a matter of just like how frequently they take a look and in what cases they take a look at. And the other factor would be, I guess how much power they have to do something. Either it could be just presenting frequent reports, reporting out, or it could be something else. But I don't. Given that we are a small town, I think an independent review board with designated powers might actually be more efficient than it would be in a very large city.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
Yeah. But or the alternative way of looking at it is an independent review person. Which so one person board. I mean, and that's just an idea, but we ought to look at all the ideas, all the options out there. Okay. Anything else on this subcommittee? Hearing none.
Yeah.
Is anything in the chat room?
What? Oh. I'd like to mention something but I'll wait and see if there's anybody in the chat room who wants to say something.
No, I don't see anyone.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just wanted to mention this doesn't quite fall into either of the committees, but I have been I mentioned that I did interview the town and the police IT director, and I wrote up a little kind of report on that interview, which I put into our materials. And since then, I also had a kind of a supplemental emails and phone conversation with Dan O'Leary, and I added that as an addendum. So in the materials on the website in our website tonight, there's both the my original write up and the addendum, and I think it's something I would value people taking a look at. It gives us a lot of options about where to find data on what the police have been doing, what procedures there are, and potential ideas for doing for expanding that in other ways. I just think it's a real good gold mine of information. So.
Right. Thank you. Hey, can I butt in? I was wrong. There is something in the Q&A. I was looking in the chat room, but and it's from Felina Silva Robinson, who's a member of the Women's Commission, and she's a liaison to this committee. So it's kind of separate from what we're talking about now, but let me just read it anyway. I know this may be separate from what you are talking about right now, but did you see the article in the tab about the police amazingly good job handling the mental health crisis without force the other day? This was a repeated instance. I think she's referring to the Facebook posting that is in our packet. But I mentioned that mainly because I want Felina to feel free to please come into the conversation and give us any insight she has from the standpoint of the Women's Commission. So I mean, she doesn't have to do that now, but don't hesitate to ask to come into the conversation. So. Okay, any other discussion of this? Okay, next, civil rights, militarization, and mass events. Whose subcommittee is that? Or who's on that subcommittee? I know I should know, but I don't. Okay,
am.
Paul, that's right, Paul Yee, I'm sorry. Before you start, one thing, in terms of the militarization piece of this, the surveillance committee has been studying military type equipment owned by the police department, and we put out a report that I'm updating, to add some additional information to. But as soon as that's finished, and I see that I just got some information from Lieutenant Campbell today. We're going to circulate that, and that will be at least a part of your committee's work that's already been done. So, okay, Paul, so talk to me.
Oh, so we didn't have a chance to meet, and so I don't have a report, but I do acknowledge that Bernard has drafted a very detailed work plan and task plan that the committee needs to work on and agree to when we get to meet. And I think Bernard had some suggestions about contacting Dan O'Leary about getting more information or data about the 10 topics that we were addressing also.
Great.
And
Okay,
Bernard,
thank
if it's okay with you, Bernard, I would still like to serve on that subcommittee ex officio, or whatever you
Yep.
want to call it.
I have no objection. Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll work you to death.
Yes, I know.
So we do need another person if anybody wishes to join us. So it's Bernard and myself, and June as ex officio right now.
And this is a very important committee because it includes civil rights. So it will be looking at issues of racial disparity, disparity, and other issues related to race, which is going to be a very important piece of any report that we do.
It's also looking at mass events, right? And who,
Yeah, tell me what that means. I guess things like the marathon, huh?
Yeah. With your language.
I don't think that was
No,
my
it was
language.
my language.
Oh, it's your language?
But
I think it
like
means- does it mean
protests.
protests,
Yeah,
and the
protests.
marathon
Okay.
and
Other large gatherings.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Casey,
no, that's important. Yeah.
Casey and Chief, what do you call large gatherings of people that require a police presence, like the Red Sox win the World Series, and or
But
a
we're-
BLM protest?
Yeah, this is going to, one of the things, or the type of thing that this committee will be looking at are protests like the protests at the library across from the police department a few months ago, where, because Brookline does not have I don't know what they call them, a riot squad or whatever it's called. We use the sheriff department for Norfolk County. And that was problematic because of breakdown in communication, and the fact that they have different standards than Brookline, and it didn't turn into an ugly scene. It's just a very bad scene. There are a lot of people who intervene to prevent it from becoming ugly, but that's the type of situation I think that the mass events piece of this subcommittee will be looking at.
Who's going to be watching the polls on election day? Is that the
Everybody.
Yeah, right.
no? I mean, who is like? Wasn't there a Globe article that said the National Guard was coming in or something?
I didn't see that.
It was the front page of the Globe a couple of days ago that the governor I thought said that
I should read the
they're
Globe.
expecting people to get harassed at the polls. And I mean, have the police heard anything about election day in the polls?
Yeah. Hey, that's sort of off topic, but I'm sorry.
We regularly.
Oh,
you're muted.
We do regularly staff the polls, and we're planning to do so again for November. We don't have any specific intelligence that we need to do anything additional with National Guard at this time. So that's news to me. I don't believe that's happening in Brookline. I believe we're just going to continue to staff them as we have in years past.
Yeah, are you sure, June, that it was even in Massachusetts? I'm just asking.
It was Governor Baker. I'll find it was this week, the front page of the Globe, over the fold. I'll find it. I'll send it out if people are interested.
Good. Scary times that we're living in. Okay, finally, community outreach, youth, non-traditional roles. And that subcommittee is, who's on that subcommittee? So June Brenny's on that subcommittee. Who else is on the subcommittee with you?
It's hard to quit this group.
Okay. Who else is on the subcommittee with you?
You, Bernard?
Me? Okay.
You,
I think it's
Michael,
just the two of us.
myself,
Oh,
and Jonathan, I believe.
Okay. Would anyone like to do a report on anything that we're doing or anything that is planned to be doing?
I don't think we've
Done?
met yet.
Okay.
So we did
So-
meet. We had a meeting today at 4 o'clock.
Oh, I wasn't invited.
Okay.
How'd it go?
It was Janice, Michael, and myself who logged in. Our goal was to finalize the language and approve the language for the survey of the walk and talk program, surveying the Brookline Housing Authority residents. We have a draft cover letter and survey instrument that Michael Juro has worked really hard on. We talked, we've been in communications over the last month, primarily Jonathan, Michael, and I, and Janice most recently on this survey. And I think Michael and I feel it's at a good point to move forward. Jonathan, Bernard, June, as the other committee members, we would, like your input as well. And there's, as I just emailed, there's a couple of outstanding issues that we want to address just in terms of clarifying who the point of contact would be. And Bernard, the cover letter we drafted has you as the signatory, so just your approval on being the signature on that. And those were emailed out and uploaded to our Google Docs for anyone that would like to review those.
I love that.
good.
I think the survey is fantastic. I think you guys did an amazing job on it. I just wonder, I mean, our survey is going to beat the other committee survey. Like, what are we doing with all the surveys? I mean, is anyone, are we ever going to like sort of,
Well, actually, someone who is expert in this area should think about what we're going to do with the surveys and the reliability of the surveys. I mean, when you have two surveys of one population, for example, in public housing, the fact that there are two surveys they have to respond to is going to affect their responses.
Well, we better get ours out fast.
Is this the right approach to? I mean, it seems to me we'd be better off doing some sort of coordination with the other committee on that, as far as that goes, because we want to get the best information. We need to at least talk about how.
No, absolutely. But I mean, I just think those are some issues we need to think about, and have those discussions with them as their survey is organized. I mean, their survey is of the entire town, and our survey is focused on Brookline Housing Authority.
And also our survey is focused specifically on the walk and talk program and how Brookline Housing Authority residents view that program. And so it's a much more narrow focus, where the other one is more generally about policing and experiences with police and Brookline on a larger level. Our subcommittee was tasked with looking at the walk and talk. So the survey has been narrowed, focused very narrowly on that.
I think people get survey weary, like they get anything weary. So I think, if we really want to get the most bang for our buck in terms of getting people to respond, I do think we should sort of just start getting it out there. And, I mean, maybe Michael, or, if not Michael, I certainly know people like UMass Lowell or, criminal justice departments in different universities that can kind of take a look at the data as it comes in and write it up. And, that would be like not a hard thing, I think, for someone.
Okay, that's great. Good.
Well, the quality of the data is going to largely depend on the response rate. So, the higher the response rate, the better quality the data should be. And I don't know, I think that the cover letter and going along with the survey will do a lot to bring the response rate up. So,
Okay, I have two questions. One is, given that it sounds like the walk and talk survey is in many ways, I'll say, is complementary or to the broad town survey, and 2 surveys are going out. Just to ask the question, what it makes it, well, first of all, I don't know how the town survey is going to be disseminated. Is it going to be the same way? Is it intended? Is it, well, actually, in both cases, the walk and talk survey, is it intended to go out as electronically, like all in emails? Are you gonna, or are you gonna bring it up on in paper to people associated with the walk and talk program? What is the plan for that? First of all,
Working with Brookline Housing on the survey development and distribution, and they'll be assisting us in getting the mailing addresses, not with names of individual residents, but they'll be doing a mail merge for us that will allow us to mail a hard copy of the survey with a return at stamped envelope for any respondents. We felt strongly that we wanted to make sure that the survey was being completed by Brookline Housing Authority residents, and so having that as an online tool is challenging.
Sure,
To
understand.
do the paper version, and we've narrowed it down. It's down to 2 pages, which was based on the feedback. We've been working closely with them to, really produce something that we think is like not overwhelming. At first it was 4 pages, and Michael worked his magic, got it down to 2 pages, and then Janice has been advising us, and she has has experience in this area as well, and so it will be a paper survey that will be mailed.
Okay.
So I wonder, Casey, if we should, and Michael, if we should try to get it out like in a variety of different ways. For instance, Richard and I are volunteering starting a week from tomorrow to unload groceries from the Greater Boston Food Bank at Egmont at the satellite food pantry. And I wonder if, like, I'm working a table there, if I had a pile of them and I said, we're just I'm working on a committee and we're trying to, or I quit a committee, but I'm volunteering to help them get the survey done. Would you take this and consider filling it out? You'll get it in the mail probably also, but maybe you could just fill it out right now as you shopping.
Some of those residents that are coming to the food pantry, although it's at Egmont, will not be Brookline Housing Authority residents. And so I think that's why we've narrowed the scope to mailing it, just so that we are ensuring that the people who are completing the survey about how they want to interact with the police are actually the housing authority residents. And so that would just be my point on that. It's not ready to be handed out yet. We do need to translate it once we can get approval on the language. Michael and I think, and Janice, we were not a quorum, so we did not vote on it, but we feel comfortable with the language. And if the committee is prepared to vote on the language, we can move forward with having that translated and getting the mailing labels with housing and from housing authority staff and getting it out quickly.
Okay, now that raises a problem. How do we get the committee to approve it? Is the committee willing to delegate that to the subcommittee, which I suggest? Would anyone object to that?
I'd like to look at it, but.
Well, no, yeah, of course, everyone should look at it. Casey, could you send that around to everyone on the committee and receive their comments?
Yeah, both the cover letter and the survey were sent around by Michael and myself today. I think the drafts have been posted in most of our previous stuff, but it is narrowed down really now to the 2 pages. And so those should be in your inbox and also in our Google Docs.
So could people look at that, put together your comments, and send them to Dan O'Leary, so we don't have open meeting law issues, and Dan will work with whoever to sort of finalize things. Okay, is that, and do people agree that that process could result in the committee's approval of the survey, so we can get it out soon?
I think once we give comments to the committee, it would make sense. I don't have a problem with the, unless there were substantial objections, which I don't expect. I would expect the committee to be reasonable about saying, we're in good shape. So.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's do it that way, because I do want to get this survey out, because I think it'll be very interesting. It will provide us incredibly useful information.
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds great. So I am curious, and I realize that the The town survey is in the purview of the reimagining task force. But does anybody have any information on how they're planning to send that out? I would, well, I'm just asking the question because I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're mailing it to everyone in town.
Tufts is taking care of it.
Pardon me?
Tufts.
Yeah, but so Tufts is mailing it.
Tufts, yeah, okay, yeah.
The cost that we're paying is for postage.
I think it's more than mailing. And by the way, for those of you that have 2 hours every Friday morning, I think it's good for us to be watching their meetings, and I wish they would be watching ours as well. But
some of them are.
What's that?
Some of them are.
Yeah, I know some of them are. But my point is that, as I recall, and I don't take notes for them like I do for us, that they're talking about more than a mailing, I believe. Does anyone else recall hearing that, or am I imagining it?
Michael just wrote that they're sending a letter with a link to the survey.
Yeah. Okay, a letter with a link. Okay.
That means it's a mailing, but in the is it an email letter or a hard copy letter?
Paper.
So they've got to type in. They have to type in. Oh, that's interesting.
But they're oversampling BHA. They're sending the letter to every address in BHA, which creates the issue that we're both surveying all BHA residents within a pretty similar time period.
See, I don't know.
Well, let's not.
I think we're going to have a hard time getting people to respond to this if they're just getting it in the mail. That's my personal feeling. I hope I'm wrong, but I've done some stuff like this before. It's like people throw out mail. They're not going to. I don't know that they're going to. They have to sit and fill it out and then mail it back.
Okay, let's see how it goes. I mean, we have the Housing Authority helping us to contact people. We're going to have a cover letter so that they know it's coming and why it's important. So I think we'll get a significant response.
Yeah,
it won't be 100%.
Oh, it's never 100%. I'm a little pessimistic about it too, to tell you the truth. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, since they cover sort of two different sorts of things, I actually find myself wondering if it would make sense to have some sort of a coordinated thing where if you're targeting the BHA residents, if you would have a way of putting as two parts of the same survey practically, you put them both in the same envelope, and so at least it's one mailing. I also believe in doing it in addition to other ways of addressing them, perhaps in addition to mailings. But I don't like the idea of it seeming like two completely independent things that are competing. I would feel much more comfortable if it was one coordinated thing, because especially they are asking different questions. I would rather that be a supplement that we give to Brookline housing residents for the walk and talk program.
Maybe in the cover letter, we ought to mention that there's another survey coming, but the logistics of combining them, I think, are just overwhelming, because their survey is part of a 3 municipality program where it's going out to Brookline, Somerville, and Medford. So, and then it's going out through Tufts system. So to coordinate getting, our survey and their survey with respect to BHA, it seems to me that's way above our, ability to organize things or have the resources to do that.
And also, I know that in listening to the Reimagining Committee, I don't believe Tufts there were some concerns from that committee around some language that was in their survey, and they didn't have the ability to even make an edit where they didn't agree, I believe, with the race categories or gender categories. So it's a very specific tool that Tufts is using, and we weren't able to modify that for Brookline specific. There's some questions in that survey that are really irrelevant here and ask questions that probably should have been taken out, but I don't think as a community we were able to do that. I think we just move forward with what we have, and there's, once you look at it, I think you'll see it's brief. It gives an explanation of what we're doing and what we're asking, and it is a separate tool. I don't think people will be overwhelmed. I spoke with housing about, what their thought was on whether or not having to return it would be a barrier for their residents, and they did not believe so, because we did look at, working with the housing managers to distribute it. We looked at doing it electronically, and, from the housing authority staff, they thought that this was the best method to take, would to be to mail it with a return envelope, and they didn't think that it would be a barrier for participation. And hopefully that's the case, because I do think we get great data from it.
Let me correct one thing. I think they did make some edits to the survey. I don't know. I guess
tough survey, right?
Yeah, the tough survey. I don't think it's accurate to say that there are no edits. I don't recall specifically, but there may have been some edits. But that's just a little detail that I don't want anyone to yell at us for getting wrong. So.
Well, I have a quick suggestion on this. This, like June and many of us, this points out the problems of the split committees, but my suggestion on this, to make it simple, is that Bernard talk to Raul, tell Raul that we're planning to do this, and the two of them try to coordinate and just go ahead with it after our committee has a chance to glance at it. I mean, it just seems to me that the logistics really could be worked out between the two of you, I would hope.
Okay, I'll touch base with him. I'm pretty sure he knows about our survey. But,
Alma Stossa, who is just wrote, she's on the Reimagining Committee, she wrote, "Hi, we're also discussing community outreach efforts as a follow-up to the mailing for the Tough survey, task force member Alma Stossa." And then she said, yes, there were some edits that we agreed on with Tufts.
Okay. Oh, that's in the Q&A?
I corrected on that. Thank you. I apologize. Maybe that was 2 meetings ago. I also just want to point out, Marty, we're looking to have this translated so our residents can answer it in the language that they're most comfortable with. They're doing a survey, which it's a mailing with a link to go online to do a survey. Ours is not that. Ours is specific. It's a paper survey. I just feel like we've been working on this, and if we can agree on the language, I think we just move forward with sending it out. That would be my suggestion. And I think it's more complicated to try and link with the other task force on this. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Okay, but I'll still talk to Raul, and we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a link. I'm just talking about a shared conversation. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, anything else? Is that the end of the meeting? We went through the subcommittee work. I'm encouraging people to sort of develop outlines for their work going forward, have meetings and accomplish the task of your subcommittees, and we'll proceed with the Reform Committee's work. I guess we're way over time, but do you want to let's see if there's any comments from the audience? So Devin, I'm telling people that if they have a comment or question, that this is a time to present it. 3 minutes per person, and let's see if we can spend another 10 minutes hearing from people. If people want to. Okay.
The first person who's requested to make a comment is John Harris.
Mr.
John,
Harris.
you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video when you're ready.
Yes, hi, thank you. This is just a quick question, and it's about the use of force issues that you folks are looking at. I hope you will look at the use of what the Brookline Police Department does or does not do regarding the use of tranquilizers during arrest or high tense situations. And I'm concerned especially about, let's see, Mr. McLean of Aurora, Colorado, a young man who was, put ketamine was a tranquilizer he was given during an arrest, in spite of the fact that although he seemed unusual during the incident, he did not seem violent in any way. I just hope the issue, again, of tranquilizers during arrest situations or high tense situations is addressed by this committee. Thank you.
Okay, good. What's the name of that tranquilizer?
Ketamine or ketamine. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Probably KET something.
It's ketamine.
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 Thank you.
It's ketamine. It's
Casey, do
ketamine.
you know anything about that?
We do not have tranquilizers or utilize those in the Brookline Police Department.
And if we did, I hope you would share them with the rest of the committee.
I've
Okay.
actually never even heard of that being something that police departments use. So
Okay, John.
I would be interested because you mentioned a specific name, John. So I would be very interested in if you can if you've got other information about that, I would be very interested in finding out.
Well, the person I have, the full name is Elijah McLean. It was in Aurora, Colorado.
Always there.
And it was last summer, not.
Okay, wait.
Can I speak to that a minute, Bernard?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was not in this was not in Brookline. This was something that happened in Colorado.
Clearly not in Brookline. And I just, again, I'm just hoping there's a procedure, a written procedure clarifying any use or not in the
I get
town.
it. Okay.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Can I speak to that just briefly? Ketamine is a highly controlled narcotic. It's actually Spravato. It's used for refractory depression. It's also used in anesthesia. That is a drug that would require in Massachusetts, would require a physician's order and probably a physician to administer it. So I don't know what the rules are in Colorado, but in Massachusetts, those kinds of drugs would not be in the hands of anybody other than a physician or a healthcare provider, unless it was illegal. So that I think I would look to Dan or Casey, but I can't imagine that would be even possible in Massachusetts with how regulated our healthcare system is around drugs like that.
It'd be useful since the issue came up to, if someone would just put together a short fact sheet on, what the rules are with respect to tranquilizers. I mean, other than animal tranquilizers, which I assume that animal control uses, but on humans. So.
I'll be honest with you, my 40 years in the police department, we've never used tranquilizers on anybody. It just doesn't happen. If we have to take care of somebody and get them to the hospitals are right down the street from Brookline. There's no use. It's never been used in Brookline. I'd go as far as saying by the police department on the subject.
Right.
Yeah, the only time I've ever done that is in an emergency room setting as the physician on record with somebody brought in from a police department who requires chemical, physical restraint. But in 35 years of practice, I've never seen it happen in the community. I don't think it would ever happen in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Right. And very rarely it would happen in a local jail or a lockup. But again, like not really in Massachusetts, nobody likes to do it. And it would only be with a doctor's order and a doctor administering it. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to make comments, Devin?
At this time, there are 7 attendees, and no one has used the hand raise feature or Q&A to indicate that they'd like to make a comment.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. The meeting
Bernard,
is now I'm sorry.
If we have a minute, no, sorry, this is Devin. I just want to remind committee members, while you are planning your subcommittee meetings, if you have materials that you need posted, please be sure that you're getting them to me and Kate, at least one day before the 48-hour posting period. That way we can work that into our schedule so that there's plenty of time and we make sure that it gets posted and the public has ample notice. And then the second piece that I just want to share is if you are providing materials for the larger committee meeting, like for tonight's meeting, if you could send that to me as early as possible, that would be great because it's often best when the public can follow along with the documents that we're referencing. So I really try and get the packet posted as early as possible. So I'm not retroactively having to post it with documents. I know we're now on this every other week schedule. So hopefully that will give people some time to be able to get things ready for the packet. And then just the last piece, and I'm going to remind the task force of this as well, if you can be joining the meetings at least 10 minutes in advance for big, and as well as just any troubleshooting, that would be great.
Great, thank you. And that was directed, or that comment was directed at me because
No,
I tried 5 minutes early and had a ton of problems. Anyway, before we go, I do want to ask Felina Silva Robinson if she has any thoughts. If she doesn't, if you don't worry about it. But just be aware that if you ever have any thoughts during our meeting from the standpoint of the Women's Commission or issues that the Women's Commission is taking up, please speak up. And I'd appreciate it if you would mention to the Women's Commission that we're more than willing to accept any comments, suggestions, or insights that they would have. So, okay. Apparently, Felina is no longer with us. But at any rate, so that's the end of the meeting. Oh wait, she is here.
She doesn't want to say anything.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, thank you, everyone. Meeting's over. You can leave the webinar.
Thank you.